Welcome to Protractors. Before we start getting into protractors, let's review a little bit about what we see here. Over here, I see a line. And how we know it's a line? Because it has two arrows at the end of each one, which is to symbolize that the line goes on and on forever. Infinity, it just keeps moving on. It doesn't stop. Whereas a line segment has these two endpoints at the end of the line, and that is just showing you that's just a part of a line. Then, in order to understand angles that we've also been studying, we know that a ray is an arrow that's joined with an endpoint, and it goes in one direction. But if we join another ray to it, we have now formed an angle. And in this case, it's an acute angle because it's so cute and tiny. So this is an acute angle, but an angle is just formed by two rays. One right there and one right there. And then over here is our protractor. Protractor has two different scales. And in the middle is the 90 degrees, the outer scale, and then there's the inner scale. And the reason why there's two different scales because the angles can change different directions. So you always have to ask yourself, what kind of angle am I looking at? And then you'll know what scale to use. If you notice that if I put two protractors on top of each other, I will form a circle, right like this. This is a big circle. And there is 360 degrees in one circle. So if I flipped one protractor around, that would be the bottom. Here's the other one. It can go on top. And I would be making a full, complete circle. In one protractor, there's 180 degrees. So let's try to connect it. And there we're making our complete circle. And there is 360 degrees in a circle. And if I take in one of those protractors is 180 degrees. And remember, one of the angles is called a straight angle because there's 180 degrees in a straight angle. So if I look over here again, here's our center point. This is where we line up that vertex, that endpoint that the two rays meet at. And we put the protractor on top of that point. There's the center. And here's the outer scale, and then here is the inner scale. Again, you find out what scale you need based on the direction the angle is going. But before we start measuring angles, we need to figure out what types of angles are there. There is one that's called an acute, and it's so cute because it's so small. And then you have something called an obtuse, big like a moose. That's bigger than 90 degrees. This is less than 90 degrees. An acute angle is anything from 1 degree to 89. An obtuse angle is anything from 91 degrees to 179. Straight is basically what I said before. That's always going to be 180. And then we have a right angle. And a right angle always equals 90 degrees. So when we're looking at different kinds of angles, I kind of like to look at a right angle as, remember to sit up straight in your chair because you're kind of forming that L to make that 90 degrees. And then an acute angle measures less than 90 degrees. And you kind of can remember it as, remember to fold up your chair. Like you're folding up that L. You're making less than an L to make an acute angle. And then obtuse angle, let's be lazy like a moose, and we're going greater than 90 degrees. Remember to lean and relax. And you're making a bigger angle than an L. It's going back. Lean and relax. You see how this looks like it's going backwards? Leaning back to relax. So greater than 90 degrees. So the next couple of days, you're going to be playing with protractors. And the very most important question when you look at this angle right here, you can't just jump in and measure it. You have to ask yourself, what kind of angle am I looking at? Am I looking at an acute angle? Less than 90 degrees? Am I looking at an obtuse angle? More than 90 degrees? A right angle, which is a perfect L, sit up, straight up in your chair? Or is it a straight angle, just one long line that always equals 180? So as you know, looking at this looks like you're folding up your chair. And you know that when you're doing that, it's less than 90 degrees, so you are looking at an acute angle. So let's move our acute angle over. I'm labeling it. And then I'm also going to line up my endpoint. Here's my endpoint right here. I'm going to put that where the two rays meet. And that's where my center point is. And now I can measure it. Well, because I'm measuring an acute angle, I need to use the inner scale, not the outer scale, because the outer scale is showing me obtuse measurements. I need to use the inner scale because it's showing me acute measurements. So this angle is around about 30 degrees. Remember, place your endpoint, your center point on the protractor on where the two rays meet, and make sure you're labeling it what kind of angle it is, and then you know what type of scale to use. The next one, looking at this angle right here, I need to say, is this an acute, straight, right, or obtuse? Just like that image I showed you before, let's lean back and relax. We're getting way back in our chair, not sitting up straight up like that L. We're looking at an obtuse angle. So once we know that it's an obtuse angle, then we can move our protractor and move it up to that base, the center point. And then we need to say, well, because I'm looking at an obtuse angle, am I using the inner scale or the outer scale? And I know that because I'm doing an obtuse angle, it's more than 90 degrees. I need to use the inner scale right here. And this is around about 125 degrees because it's between 120 and 130. And make sure that you're lining up your center point to where the two rays meet. Then you're going to try to get your best accurate measurement. Here's ones that we're looking at different types of triangles, and these are called right triangles. And I am looking at different ways that we can measure this. And I'm looking at this angle right here. And this is a straight up in your chair, making that perfect L, and that's 90 degrees. We also can measure different angles in the shapes by then moving our protractor in a different direction. And we know right here, if we're going to measure this angle right here, this is about 45 degrees because it's in between 40 and 50 because it's an acute angle. This is an acute measurement right here. And then also, right here is about 45 degrees also because this is also an acute angle, and it's between 40 and 50. All right, let's move on. I look at this angle, and I have to automatically say, what type of angle am I looking at? Well, I know it's less than that L, where I'm sitting up straight in my chair, sitting up and paying attention, you're alert, you're making that 90-degree angle. It's less than that, and we know when it's less than 90 degrees, this becomes an acute angle. So now, since we know it's acute angle, let's move our protractor on top of the angle. Please put your base point, your center point, onto where the two rays meet. And then you need to see, okay, here is acute angle. Am I using the inner scale or the outer scale? Well, if I use the outer scale, look at those measurements. They're big, and we know those are obtuse. We're not dealing with an obtuse angle. We're dealing with an acute. So we're using the inner scale, and it's somewhere between 60 and 70. It's maybe 66 degrees, 67 degrees, but if you said 65, I'm fine with that because it's a little past the halfway point between 60 and 70. Okay, let's move on. Now I'm looking at that angle. Before I can measure it, I have to label it. Is it acute, obtuse, right, or straight? Now, again, if we remember the way we fold up and we move around our chairs, sitting right up, straight up is forming that L. anything more and we're leaning back to relax in our chair, we are using or looking at an obtuse angle. An obtuse angle is more than 90 degrees. So let's place our protractor, line up that center point on top of where the two rays are. And we've got to focus on, are we looking at the outer scale or the inner scale? And in this one, we're looking at the inner scale because we're looking at an obtuse angle, which is right about here. So it's in between 110 degrees and 120. So be careful that we don't say 105 because that would be over here. This is between 110 and we're going to the left, so we're getting bigger. So 110 and 120 is 115 degrees. So this is about a 115 degree angle. All right, the next one. Oh, look at that. We're really leaning back and relaxing. And when we know we're leaning back and relaxing, we're looking at an obtuse angle, right? Because it's getting really close to that 180 degrees, which is really close to straight. Then we're going to place our protractor on top of our angle, match up the two raise points, right there. And since we're doing an obtuse angle, we need to look at what? The outer scale or the inner scale? We're going to be looking at the inner scale because it's obtuse. These are greater measurements. And it's between 150 and 160. So it's growing. It's getting bigger. So I can't say it's probably closer to maybe 158, 157. So I would put down 157 degrees. And this one, look at that one. And just by looking at that, I hope you guys can tell. It's so cute. That is what we call an acute angle because we're folding the chair up. We're no longer sitting up straight up, making that L. We're folding it up. And when we fold it up, we know that we're talking about an acute angle. Acute angle is less than 90 degrees. So I pick up my protractor. I set up my center point to it. And we know that we're using the inner scale because the inner scale right here in this direction is showing me the smaller acute measurements. And this is about 20 degrees. This angle is 20 degrees. Hey, happy measuring time. All right, guys. Now you understand there's an acute, obtuse, and straight and right angles. Always first identify what type of angle you're looking at. Then move your protractor to the center point to where the two rays meet. And then figure out, because you're looking at that type of angle, are you using the inner scale or the outer scale? So, how many degrees is this angle? You're going to have to click, hold, and drag it. So there we go. How many degrees is this angle? All right, as I place it there, how many degrees is that angle? Next one. First, identify what kind of angle that is. And once you do that, I'm picking up the protractor and I'm going to line it up with this center point. And then I figure out how many degrees is that angle using the inner scale or the outer scale. How many degrees are in that angle? And our last one for today. But how many degrees are in that angle? First, you have to identify what kind of angle it is, and then move over your protractor to see. Okay? How many degrees are in that angle? Now, what you guys are going to be doing is you're going to be doing and picking up these protractors in Google Classroom and moving your protractors onto the shapes yourselves, just like I showed you today. You all have become protractor professionals. Excellent job. You guys are going to begin doing your assignment in Google Classroom, practicing using protractors. Great job today, guys.